We get to what I mentioned last month. Before the mainstream media told you, I told you what's coming. The budget is so horrible in California because of too many state employees, too many pension funds that Walter Buren was talking about earlier. You know, if they want to tax the money to get money, why not just go grab some of the teachers' union money? Grab some of those big pension funds from the state employees and use that to pay the budget. Why tax you out of house and home? Moving on, weed is the street name. Have you ever smelled weed, Uncle Sam? You know that pot stuff?
No, I haven't.
I have. I smelled it in Vietnam and I hate it. It brings back bad memories of Vietnam. I never want to smell weed again. However, the state legislature for almost a year and a half has had a bill. They've been looking it over. They're ready to pass it. It's going to pass. Governor Arnold's going to sign it into law. Weed will become legal this year to balance the budget. Watch the screaming and the posturing of the conservative Christians and all that. It's going to pass anyway. So with that in mind, I think we should take a look back at a guy named Robert BACKUS, who did a show, and he had a doctor, he had a lawyer talking about weed. We're going to go to that now. This show was done 10 years ago, and they were simply talking about medical marijuana. Be back in a few minutes.
Don't do that. Let's get right into the program. On the set here tonight with me, we have approximately, I would say 4 of the bravest men in Santa Barbara. They are personally involved and dedicated to bucking the system. And when I say bucking the system, I mean that bureaucratic despotism, that dictatorship out there run by our city manager that just squeezes in every little way to make our rubber stamp city council helpless and useless. And therefore, when we get some new freedoms or some new recognition of our rights, it's a real tough fight. And as you may know, medical marijuana, or the tolerance of medical marijuana in Santa Barbara, is a fight currently being brought to the city council. And just recently we had a very small victory by a very small vote to let the city of Santa Barbara come to the assistance of the medically afflicted who need marijuana for one reason or another in their medical problems. The city council voted by one vote to even let this thought be considered by the ordinance committee. I mean, this wasn't a vote on whether to have a defensive ordinance on behalf of these victims. It was simply, do we want to talk about it? And city council was barely able to say, yeah, let's talk about it. Let's see what Hawaii is doing. Let's see what Oregon is doing. Let's see what other states and cities and counties are doing. And so we'll let our ordinance committee chew on this. Well, believe me, in this city, that's progress. So let's show our guests here and make some introductions. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me on the set this evening. To my right is David Pryor, a gentleman who has actually gone through the arduous process of validating his right to medical marijuana through the court system. And he actually has the support of the courts to treat his ailments and illnesses with the marijuana plant that he grows, if I'm correct.
That's correct.
Don't want to set you up for a fall there.
No, that's correct.
Okay, and to his right is a medical doctor by the name of Dr. David Behrman, who is well spoken on the subject of the medicinal value of marijuana as such. He travels the state speaking. He is an open advocate of the legalization, and we're going to hear a lot of medical expertise from him. To his right is a gentleman by the name of Seymour Weisberg. Seymour is a lawyer, a retired public defender, I believe. And he is expert on these critically confusing, difficult legal questions. So we're going to get some good not legal advice, because that might be wrong to do on TV, but we'll get a lot of good political advice from him tonight. And then on his right is a well-known character here at Public Access TV, Bruce Rittenhouse, a candidate for city office, I'm sure. And Bruce is really the guy who's he's the lead lobbyist on this issue. He's been facing down city council, doing impressive presentations to city council. He'll be performing again in front of the ordinance committee, I'm sure. And Bruce is here to tell us some of the hardcore realities of grassroots bare knuckle fighting. So altogether, we've got a hell of a lot of talent here in the studio tonight. And where should we start? maybe we ought to start with Proposition 215, or was it 217? 215.
215.
215, that was
215.
passed by initiative of the people of California, right?
In 1996.
Gosh, 4 years ago.
Yes.
And how much good is it doing us?
Well, you know, people were using marijuana for medicinal purposes before Prop 215. They continue to do so after Prop 215. The dilemma they face is where to get marijuana to use medicinally, how to get a safe product, how to get it at a reasonable cost,
Yep.
and how to get it without fear of being arrested.
Hassled by the cops.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
That's where we're at. Nothing has been done to implement Proposition 215 since 1996. That's why my friend Bruce Rittenhouse, on his own initiative, has introduced an ordinance, and the Ordinance Committee is now studying it.
Here in Santa Barbara, right?
Yes, correct.
But how's it going statewide? Does anybody really have the right to use medicinal marijuana, even if they grow it for themselves, and don't sell it, don't trade, just grow it and consume it for their medical problems? Do they really have the right, or is it still, unfortunately, a privilege?
I'll tell you what I tell patients who ask that question, is that because the state has not passed the implementing legislation to go along with the initiative that makes it legal, it's basically a free-for-all, that it's up to the individual discretion of every individual police officer in the state of California, and then it's up to the discretion of the assistant district attorney who gets the case, and then it may be up to the discretion of the jury. Now, as a practical matter, there are a number of jurisdictions that have got guidelines and that recognize that the people voted fairly overwhelmingly, 56% of the people statewide, nearly 70% of the people in Santa Barbara, that this is the law in the state of California. The federal government still has a problem with that, and I think some other people are going to address that. They actually had a press conference shortly after the initiative passed, where General McCaffrey, he was the fellow that Seymour Hersh recently accused of being a war criminal, and he's our drug czar.
Of more than one war. The Gulf War and the war on drugs.
That's right.
He's got a real record.
And Donna Shalala and Janet Reno, and they threatened doctors that they would bar them from receiving Medicaid payments, Medicare payments, and that they would not give them their BNDD number, which allows you to write triplicate prescriptions, and which some insurance companies use as a provider identifier for payment of insurance payments. The CMA and the AMA both challenged the federal government, and there was a lawsuit called Conant versus McCaffrey, and actually an associate of mine who was in the Nixon White House was one of the litigants there. The interesting thing here is that the Nixon administration was far more liberal towards marijuana than the Clinton administration. There were 700,000 arrests last year in the Clinton administration. And Nixon's, who had the first drug czar, was a distinguished physician named Dr. Jerome Jaffe, who wrote the chapter in the standard textbook on pharmacology for medical schools. He was a professor in a medical school. He treated opiate abusers. So Jaffe was well-trained.
Well, there you had a doctor, a lawyer, an Indian chief, an activist, and a pot user, a marijuana user, medical marijuana user. It'd be interesting to track them down, and I tried. And it appears the lawyer threw up and went to South America and started a ranch or something. He's done with the whole court system. Haven't been able to track down the marijuana user.